Evening, buenas noches, et bonsoir, nos amis. Thank you so much for joining us on this difficult and important anniversary, the 77th liberation of Auschwitz, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Some of the material we're going to present tonight, as you may have expected, is hard to hear. But what we bring you tonight is a community of Colorado poets, all members of the Colorado Poets Center, bearing witness the deep and ancient act and art of being a voice for the silenced, the lost, the endangered, the gone. And we are grateful to you, our audience, for bearing witness this night with us. Tonight is a form of Kaddish, the traditional prayers for the dead we Jewish people say, and which tonight will be poetically said and necessarily also by non-Jewish people, because it will take all of us committing that all genocide must stop, whether to Jewish people, Uyghur people, Native Americans, Rohingya people, Bosnians. By all of our actions, our beliefs, and our words, may it stop forever and never happen again. I know that's a big wish, but that's what brings us here together tonight, into a community of people who care and people who speak out and speak up. This evening's poetry reading is sponsored by the Colorado Poets Center and was made possible by the generous donations of the Lawrence King family, Michael Maurer, Jan Fritz, and we thank you all. This evening is dedicated to the memory of Andrew Svedlow, a Colorado Poets Center poet who passed away on November 24th. Andrew worked at the University of Northern Colorado in art history and was a founding member of the Artwork Center for Contemporary Art in Loveland, where he had a one-person art exhibition, Remembrance, which was about his personal and cultural connection to the Holocaust. This event was dear to him, so tonight we remember him. So, a little bit of housekeeping. In this Zoom, you see us, but we don't see you. So to knit us into a shared community, we ask you, please talk to us in the chat. Praise poems, share memories, share lines you hear, anything you're thinking. We'll be watching, and this creates a community of sayers and listeners in a circle of poem. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see two little sort of quote circles that say Q&A. And we invite you to put your questions for us there. And we will answer as many as possible at the end of a reading. You can ask a particular poet a question or just pose a question in general, and we'll feed them out. So now, we're here for poetry, and let us begin. Our first poet tonight is a poet known to almost every single one of us here in Colorado and further, David Rothman. David has published many, many volumes of poetry and prose. Those of us who know David rely on him for his passionate scholarship. He lives in Crested Butte, Colorado. Welcome, David.
Wonderful to be here. I'd like to begin with a poem by Miklos Radnoti, who was a Hungarian poet who was killed by his Hungarian captors during a forced march. He was Jewish in 1944 when he was about 35 years old. As it so happens, he's been translated by two of my dear friends, the late John Ridland and the brilliant Fred Turner. And I'm going to read a translation of one of his last poems, which he wrote during this forced march in 1944. In fact, this one's dated October 6, 1944. And we know the date because he dated it because he wrote it in a little notebook that he carried in his pocket that was discovered after he was killed. He was shot by his captors along with about 20 other prisoners at the time, and somehow somebody found this notebook in his pocket that included his last poems. So it's a tragic life, but at the same time, he was a brilliant poet. I don't know Hungarian, so I'm not going to read it in Hungarian. I'm just going to read the translation by Fred Turner. It's just given a number in a series of poems that were called postcards, picture postcards. It's number 2, and it's dated October 6th, 1944, only a couple of weeks before he died. I guess I'd only say that one of the interesting things about it is how beautiful it is in the midst of such suffering. At 9 kilometers, the pall of burning hayrick, homestead, farm. At the field's edge, the peasants, silent, smoking pipes against the fear of harm. Here, the lake ruffled only by the step of a tiny shepherdess, where a white cloud is what the ruffled sheep drink in their lowliness. The next poem is called Sweetness and Light. The rest of the poems are by me. Sweetness and light. Things just aren't going well. Let's kill the Jews. They all belong in hell. Let's kill the Jews. They descend from monkeys and from apes. Their beards are long. They smell. Let's kill the Jews. They make their matzah with our children's blood. Let's throw them down a well. Let's kill the Jews. Their blood's impure. They want to screw our girls, corrupt our precious cells. Let's kill the Jews. We are not free, and no one has a job. And so our leaders yell, let's kill the Jews. They're weak and feeble, but they're dangerous. Let's gate them where they dwell. Let's kill the Jews. Their banks are sucking out our vital fluids. They're stealing what we'd sell. Let's kill the Jews. We know they're in control of everything. They've cast a magic spell. Let's kill the Jews. They say the Lord their God is one. One what? Hear me, O Israel. Let's kill the Jews. They murdered God. Now this book whispers kill. There's nothing more to tell. Let's kill the Jews. We want no light unto the nations, but power no laws dispel. Let's kill the Jews. Conscience is a blemish. We are barbarians. Morality's a shackle. Let's kill the Jews. I just love terrorizing girls with dogs. Some shit themselves. It's swell. Let's kill the Jews. That little boy, he's dangerous. Strip him. Cut off his little balls. Let's kill the Jews. That woman with her child, make her dig their grave and dig it well. Let's kill the Jews. Let's lock them in the barn and burn them all. My heart's an empty shell. Let's kill the Jews. Let knives flash brightly in their children's hearts. No murder is too cruel. Let's kill the Jews. Oh, hatred, sweet, delicious, endless as the stars. Come, cast your spell. Let's kill the Jews. Oh, David, here's a star to wear. And words always fail to quell. Let's kill the Jews. So for the next poem, I have to do a screen share. This is a very famous photograph that some of you may have seen. I'm now going to read the poem that it inspired, which has an epigraph. It appeared in my book, Part of the Darkness, a few years ago. The poem is called Ivangorod, Ukraine, 1942, which is where the photo was taken. And the epigraph is from Ursula K. Le Guin. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. Ursula K. Le Guin. Upon a windswept field, the color of lead, a woman holds her child against her breast. A soldier aims his rifle at her head. A field and photograph her only bed, she turns her humble back and does her best upon a windswept field the color of lead, where she endures forever final dread. The shutter clicks. The moment has confessed. A soldier aims his rifle at her head. Why are we here? Why do we eat this bread? Why does time give this agonizing test upon a windswept field, the color of lead? Well, now this field where she and her child bled, though just a field, disturbs my word and rest. The soldier aims his rifle at her head. Yet, murdered woman who cannot be unsaid, I hear the small, brave words with which you blessed. Here on a windswept field, the color of lead, a soldier aims his rifle at your head. Hold on, I love you. Do not be afraid. I have to share another photograph, which I think you will all recognize. Everyone see Anne Frank? So this poem is called Tuesday, 9:11 a.m. I can't find the source for the title, but I got it from somewhere where apparently a group of rabbis had done some research and decided that if everything is accurate, this is the moment at which God created the universe. We go back to the beginning on a Tuesday at 9:11. So the poem is called Tuesday, 9/11. I look at you and need to know, how could you write what you do? Foolish girl. Silly girl. Idiot. I keep my ideals because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. What nonsense. Oh, my cute little jackass in a frock. You've been betrayed. The stormtroopers are on the stairs and coming up. Yet there you sit, smiling, refuting me, a ghost, challenging every bitterness. Shown up by a stubborn little girl. Forgive me. Perhaps I was wrong. And so I too will not surrender. Not to my own heartbreaking, nor to any greater ugliness. Not even to whatever I may know that you do not, such as the day of your death. Witness this one. But let this not be a prayer. Let it be a promise to ponder what you do.
This was exactly where we had to start tonight with this brave, brave work. And I especially love those lines, "Oh, David, here's a star to wear," and words, and the line, "A field and photograph her only bed." And then these lines to Anne, "A ghost, challenging every bitterness," and of course, "Let this not be a prayer, let it be a promise." Thank you, David. Our next beauty-making poet comes to us from the Western Slopes, and it is my joy to introduce our good times. Former Earth First Journal and Mountain Gazette poetry editor Art Goodtimes is co-director of the Telluride Institute's Talking Gourds poetry program and current poetry editor for Fungi, a national mycological journal. Welcome, Art.
Death Fugue, from European poet and Romanian Holocaust survivor Paul Celan, translated from the German by American poet Pierre Joris. Taught as fuge. Black milk of morning, we drink you evenings, we drink you at noon and mornings, we drink you at night, we drank and we drank. A man lives in the house, he plays with the snakes, he writes when it darkens to Deutschland, your golden hair, Margarita. He writes and steps in front of his house, and the stars glisten, and he whistles his dogs to come. He whistles his Jews to appear. Let a grave be dug in the earth, he commands us. Slay us for the dance. Black milk of dawn. We drink you at night. We drink you mornings at noontime. We drink you evenings. We drink. A man lives in the house. He plays with the snakes. He writes. He writes when it turns dark to Deutschland. Your golden hair, Margarita. Your ashen hair, Shulamite. We dig a grave in the air. There one lies at ease. He calls, jab deeper into the earth, you there. And you other men, sing and play. He grabs the gun in his belt. He draws it. His eyes are blue. Jab deeper your spades, you there, and you other men continue to play for the dance. Black milk of dawn. We drink you at night. We drink you at noon. We drink you evenings. We drink you and drink. A man lives in the house. Your golden hair, Margarita. Your ashen hair, Shulamite. He plays with the snakes. He calls out, play death more sweetly. Death is a master from Deutschland. He calls, scrape those fiddles more darkly. Then as smoke you'll rise in the air. Then you'll have a grave in the clouds. There you'll lie at ease. Black milk of dawn. We drink you at night. We drink you at noon. Death is the master from Deutschland. We drink you evenings and mornings. We drink and drink. Death is a master from Deutschland. His eye is blue. He strikes you with lead bullets. His aim is true. A man lives in the house. Your golden hair, Margarita. He sets his dogs on us. He gives us a grave in the air. He plays with the snakes and dreams. Death is a master in Deutschland. Your golden hair, Margarita. Your ashen hair, Shulamite. This famous poem from Israeli poet and Romanian Holocaust survivor Dan Pegas, written in pencil in the sealed railway car. Here, in this carload, I am Eve, with Abel, my son. If you see my other son, Cain, son of man, tell him that I Death Camp, from American Yiddish poet, lesbian scholar, and Warsaw Ghetto survivor Irena Klepfish. When they took us to the shower, I saw the Rebbitzin, her sagging breasts sparse, pubic hairs I knew, and remembered the old Rabbah, and turned my eyes away. I could still hear her advice, a woman with a husband, a scholar, when they turned on the gas. I smelled it first coming at me, pressing myself hard to the wall, crying, Rebbitzin, Rebbitzin, I am here with you, and the advice you gave me. I screamed into the wall as the blood burst from my lungs, cracking her nails in women's flesh. I watched her capsize beneath me, my blood in her mouth. I screamed when they dragged my body into the oven. I burned slowly at first. I could smell my own flesh and could hear them grunt with the weight of the Rebbitzin. And they flung her on top of me, and I could smell her hair burning against my stomach. When I pressed through the chimney, it was sunny and clear. My smoke was distinct. I rose, quiet, left her beneath. Holocaust. Conceived in war, she was born after the catastrophe, raised Christian, stories sprinkled on baptized hair like holy water, catechism class her boot camp. Jesus Christos, they tell her, was, according to the book, rejected by the Pharisees, by the Jews. And yet, the Hates Captain Barefoot finds herself celebrating Shabbat every Friday, turning distant rites into family practice, obedient to a learned vigil of kinning, fervent in remembering the Shoah, that shared World War II story of Yellow Star roundups and gunpoint liberation. She, too, has seen the arms tattooed in the algebra of Auschwitz, skeletons and stripes behind barbed wire, has read of women, children, whole families, boxcarred and shipped like cattle to the Nazi factories of ethnic cleansing. She's staying with the troubles, not to exceptionalize, since the world horrors abound, but to believe and grieve, to conceptualize evil, to see through the media's cacophony to the twisted steel plates of a possible future, the architecture of a dozen religious arguments for a just war, as if, as converts, justice, or just us, could be salvaged from genocide with a nuclear lock and blocking chaos, as if everybody else's divinities were apocalypse zombies, intent on dismembering her, him, us, as if the black milk of dawn rises in the east, dreaming gold, drinking ash, as if the scapegoat infections of even the healthy were merely the viruses of evolution, as if winnowing was the only way to assure the rapture of the species.
Wow. You hear me screaming. Oh, Art, thank you, especially for also bringing us these voices of Paul Celan and Dan Padgett. And your fantastic poem. I love so many lines. Stories sprinkled on baptized hair, fervent in remembering. She too has seen the arms. She's staying with the troubles. And then bringing in a beautiful echo, black milk of dawn rises in the east, dreaming of gold. Whew. Lyrical, slays us. Thank you, babe. Now I'm going to introduce you to a very interesting poet who's brought us a very interesting poem, Jeffrey Ethan Lee. Jeffrey Ethan Lee's first book, Invisible Sister, was a finalist for the first Many Mountains Moving Book Prize. His first novel, The Autobiography of Somebody Else, was published by White Pine Press. Welcome, Jeffrey.
This poem is called The Guard's Reverie. He thinks he must have done this hundreds of times because one of the naked mothers hid her kid in the rancid heaps of clothing. So after the screams and the futility of clawing, clutching, and climbing over each other, as if escape wherever possible atop another naked body, leaving a pyramid of the tangled dead. He hears a muffled shriek and dredges up a boy who could be 3 to 4 years old, who, just like himself, has wide blue eyes. The boy is dragged from the darkness by the man crouching in the dirty daylight, who calls him little escapee. You missed your chance to go with your mother, and worse yet, you'll make me miss my lunch. He lifts him up so easily, the boy forgets himself and hangs on to the guard, who only remembers himself at the door, dropping him to be presentable to the sergeant, who sighs, I should report this. But the guard whines, I'd really rather eat now because I haven't eaten today. Can't we just toss him in with tomorrow's? Who gives a crap? The sergeant asks, why didn't you eat? And seeing the embarrassed downward look, guesses, the shits? All right, well, get out of here. Then he walks the boy across to a different barracks, bangs the door in, and tells some startled women nothing. But seeing the boy, they understand. He thinks he must have done this hundreds of times, but he is still standing by the trash heap because there never was a boy, and if there were, no sergeant would let it live. Instead, there is only a stink so filthy and strong it ices over his eyes as he sees them again in his mind, because he has done this hundreds of times. He has to open that door and begin again the work of tearing each body from the other's clutching arms. Thank you.
Oh, Jeffrey. Got to breathe after that one. I love, that repeating line, because he has done this hundreds of times, and then calling the boy little escapee. And of course, then it comes in, there never was a boy. And then ending, he has to open that door and begin again. Whew. Strong words. Thank you so much. Now it is my very big joy to introduce to you a poet that all of us in the Columbine Poets are very much enamored of, and that is our friend Linda LaRocca. Linda LaRocca is a freelance writer and poet who lives in Salida, Colorado. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. I have 2 poems to read tonight, and my first poem is called Journey. The boxcar sways, boarded windows, elbows and knees, whispers, a strangled sob. Fingers clutch a cloth sack, winter coat, the treasured strand of pearls. Outside, hyacinths bloom. Here there is shallow breath, mumbled prayer, a child's cry, Mama, tell a story. Thin, sour air. In the dark, wrinkled skin stiffens and grows cold. A baby voice chortles. In the dark, we, without defenses, fists in mouths, teeth tearing flesh, conjure hyacinths, endless fields of open stars. My next poem I got the idea for this from reading Abraham Sutzkever's work. He's a great Yiddish language poet who really suffered during World War II and ended up being a witness at the Nuremberg trials after the war. He wrote a long poem called Epitaphs, and there's one section about a Parisian dance hall girl who's only 18 years old, and she's in a boxcar on the way to a concentration camp, and she throws her pearl necklace out a hole in the boxcar in this desperate hope that somebody will find her pearls and keep them and kind of remember her through that. And in my small way, I had to try to emulate what he did, because that image to me is so profound and incredible. So my poem is called After Abraham Sutzkever's Epitaphs. Today, there is a gold ring, somehow gleaming in the muck. Turning eyes, not head, she quickly stoops, still shoveling. The guards looking away for just that moment. They are laughing. Slipping it into one shredded pocket, she bends to the stench, willing herself not to retch, not to stop, and not to stumble. In the barracks, single shaft of yellow light slices through a crack on the wall without window. Squinting at the circle, she sees letters form the words, forever, love, forever, love. Now that someone has found this ring, let her keep it beneath a floorboard, burnish it by night with any strip of rag still covering her skin. Let her wear it when they tear down all the ovens, the barbed wire. It is hers. Now it belongs to her. And if another finds it, should they take her to the gas, let that one, let all of us, for this gold ring, recite a prayer. Thank you.
Oh, Linda, such tender work, such tender work. In the dark, we without defenses, and then, of course, yes, endless fields of open stars. And then, oh, those lines, let her wear it when they tear down all the ovens. May it be so. Yes, thank you. Our next poet has generously taken a very beautiful and masterful long work and brought us some very sort of perfect excerpts for this evening. And this poet is Natalie Giratano. Natalie is the author of 2 full-length poetry collections, Leaving Clean and Big Thicket Blues. Natalie lives in northern Colorado with her partner and daughter. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot today, especially about these words from Muriel Rukeyser. Pay attention to what they tell you to forget. And when I visited Terezin, the concentration camp outside of Prague in the Czech Republic, she was on my mind then too. And I knew I had to bear witness to what I saw, what I felt, and what I learned when I was there. So some references I make in this poem are to the children's opera called Brundabar, or Bumblebee, which was written in 1938 by Jewish Czech Hans Krasse. When he was forced to the camp, he rewrote it from memory and rewrote it for instruments that they had on hand. And it was performed by him and the children at Terezin over 40 times. And so there's something I've attached onto, like they get to defeat this evil organ grinder in the opera over 40 times, and sometimes right in the face of the Nazi audience. So I'm going to read a few sections of Songs from Terezin. You think that this is somebody else's wound, that because you don't see these walls in the act of crumbling, they are done with all of that. This flake of wall is not unlike how you slip off skin. though history, falling lightly to the ground, doesn't want to be revitalized like a useful organ. It isn't better for these walls to come down, but better that there's a change in your face when the sunlight catches the long row of gleaming white sinks, still shine, still hover around the grim piece that's made a home. Sing through the black and white film on your eyes. Sing for the milk money. Sing as though your belly doesn't ache. Sing until you become the bumblebee, then sting. This kind of blues is sung only under the worst conditions, when we and they are so far apart that we can pretend the other's music disintegrates on its way to our ears. None of this is firsthand, but you can still feel the music of this place, as though the words were being pulled through your throat, like a heavy rope that all of the dead hang onto via the knot outside of your body. Music is exile. If you can't hear it to know as much, no one ever called your name, skin of the earth. Even the man was just a man, playing the mustache on man, organ grinder. Two barn swallows with their forked tails fly around the peeling walls to get to their single nest. They are reluctant to spit shine the mud and straw in which they make a life. This way of living is not propaganda. Stand in this room alone with the birds for too long and begin to picture them here in greater numbers until the mud nests take up all the empty space of a wall, but don't have the physical strength to take it down. Walls spilled over with the energy of souls not ready to be done with this life. Brass and strings smuggled into a city of last breaths, of which you can still feel the legato, one song rising up and on, turning, twisting in our heads like a jazz, that for one more composition, one more measure, one more goddamned clear note will make us shine. Body close to body, clanging like the bells that wake us from our dreams. Thank you.
What a piece of work, Natalie. What work. Sing for the milk money. Sing until you become the bumblebee. Then this living is not propaganda. That line, a city of last breaths. Then one more measure, one more goddamn clear note. And then that ending, the bells that wake us. Woo! Thank you so much, sweetie. Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, this is going to be so sweet to hear. I am very happy to introduce next the poet Bob Cooperman. Bob Cooperman's latest collection is Reefer Madness from Kelsey Books. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Judith. Oh, thank you, Judith. I'm going to read two poems. The first one is called For Annie Nay. When Annie Nay, this is a quote from the New York Times book review about 20 years ago. When Annie Nay, a Dusseldorf cafe owner, was asked why she helped a stranger escape from the Gestapo, she replied, "Because I didn't want to be ashamed of myself when I come to stand before my God." For Annie Nay. She hid him in an empty wine cask in her cafe cellar and played with a small crucifix that hung between her collarbones and smoked while the Gestapo searched, poured themselves drinks, thudded rifle butts against every barrel but the right one. When they left, their commandant thrust an arm in salute, put his lips to her tiny hand while she muttered the Lord's Prayer and tried to keep herself from spitting. When the underground smuggled him out, he blessed her between sobs of fear and remorse for his family, tossed like bales of hay onto cattle cars. She never asked his name. Safer that way, she reasoned. No one to betray should the Nazis return, suspicion dancing in their skulls, narrow and vicious as Doberman pinchers. Later, she lay in bed and lit one last cigarette, ash fluttering from quivering fingers. Lord Jesus, she murmured, may I meet that man again to thank him for saving my soul. And the next poem I'll read is called In the Hall of the Righteous of Nations, August 11th, 1995. Friends visiting from Portland had purchased tickets for us all for the National Holocaust Memorial Museum. The weight of death so heavy, it made laughable my grief for Jerry Garcia, who died 2 days earlier on the 40th anniversary of Nagasaki, another day of horrors to shrink that one death to the infinitesimal. Except his passing hurt like gangsters working me over as we solemnly walk the halls of murder, the piles of empty shoes and boots, the photos of the lost, the cattle cars, the silent admonitions never to let it happen again. I got separated from Beth and our friends, stumbled into the hall of the righteous of nations, dedicated to saintly Gentiles who'd rescued Jews, often sacrificing their own lives, and stared at the names, their valiant deeds. I was unable to move until a voice, maybe mine, maybe one of the blessed ghosts that haunt this hall, maybe Garcia's, urged me, as Jerry used to sing, to get up and be thankful I'm living. Thank you very much.
Sweetness and redemption. What a beautiful thing to come chiming in at this moment. Thanks, Bob. The lines that really rang for me were ash fluttering from quivering fingers, walk the halls of death, and then, of course, his passing hurt like gangsters, and then get up and be thankful. Sweet air to have in our Zoom room right now. Ooh, yeah, wonderful. Our next poet, Gail Ben Ezra, has been having very, very exciting poetry adventures here in Colorado, and she's going to read you some very strong and beautiful poems tonight. Gail Ben Ezra's poems have been widely published and anthologized, and her manuscript, Stitches That Seam the World, was long-listed by the Grayson Books Poetry Contest and was a semi-finalist in the Crab Orchard Poetry Series. Welcome, Gail.
I'm going to read 2 poems tonight, and the first is entitled Star Stained. The second is called Don't Stare at the Sun. Star Stained. Between March and early June 1943, the Germans deported over 40,000 Jews from Salonika to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Nearly all were sent to the gas chambers upon arrival. Tucked in my Manhattan bed, 4,267 miles from Camp Birkenau, I heard grown-ups in the kitchen reading something that sounded like Grimm's fairy tales, but were not in my red book. The old fell over. The young stopped crying. Stories about my aunts and uncles and cousins like Racheli and Miriam, girls the same age as me, grabbed from their beds by black boot ogres, dragged into the freezing night forest and baked in huge ovens, chimneys spit Jew bone grit. I smelled the scream of their curly hair, red burning, and I stared while a crazed pair of tight tangled marionettes twisted and danced in the belly of the fire. Don't stare at the sun. Don't stare at the sun or you'll go blind, my grand-mère, who always wore long sleeves, warned me, knowing what I could not know. How sudden light can turn black. How sudden the sun god with hooked scepter and vile proclamations can rise to the throne. How sudden people, even your neighbors who ate at your table last Sunday, stare at the tyrant, become hypnotized by raging fire, and forget what they know, and go stone blind following. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Some of the lines in these very intricately, beautifully crafted poems that I enjoyed were how sudden light can turn black, and the neighbors who ate at your table last Sunday. And those lines, like Grimm's fairy tales that weren't in my red book. And then that moment where the poet says, my Manhattan bed, 4,267 miles from Camp Birkenau. Strong work, thanks. Our next poet is, a poet that I have gotten very blessed to share recent poetry adventures with. And it is our Columbine, the woman who just really takes care of our community so beautifully, Lori Wolfe. Lori Wolfe is a poet, editor, granddaughter of European immigrants, and a community organizer who is continually delighted with the power of poets to unite and move people. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you. I have two poems tonight, and the first one is a memory of childhood. I always knew that my whole European family was lost in the Holocaust, and so this first poem is about that feeling as a child, what that was like, called Keeping Track of Time, Nissan 25, year 5769. I lived in two kinds of time with two calendars. The calendar of the world, where I tried to be like everyone else, getting a new dress for Easter or Christmas Mass, but I didn't go to either of those. I was going to Hebrew school 3 times a week, learning an ancient tongue that no one spoke, learning letters and shapes that no one outside knew about. This secret burden, time weighing me with its history, with the souls of the departed marching beside me, forced to see, far too young, those pictures, the carloads of skeletons, the haunted faces of survivors as the Yanks liberated what was left of the old world. Shrunken down to bone, their cheap striped cotton suits, even their hair fell out. No food for their bodies, no food for their souls. Stripped down to the barest flicker of humanity, these few were saved. The sound of that railroad ratcheting across my history books was not the history of that little turkey traced around 5 fingers, decorated with brown and red construction paper. That was not my calendar. Mine was a lunar calendar made up of moonlight and memory. The second poem needs a little introduction, a little history. Since 1863, the mission of the International Committee of the Red Cross has been to protect and assist victims of armed conflict and help discover the fate of missing family members. That's from their Geneva Red Cross Handbook. In 1929, my mother and her family went to Paris to see her aunt, uncles, and cousin. And after the war ended, my mother registered with the International Red Cross. And although she kept checking with them, she didn't hear anything about her family for the next 55 years. 5 months after my mother died at age 80, I got this phone call. And the poem is a Bantu, which is an African form of call and response poem, where the first line, the call, is a physical or concrete item, and the response is something not measurable. Call from the Red Cross, May 2001, a Bantu for Edward Rocquier. A whiff of peppermint, a dentist in Paris, my grandmother's younger brother. A picture of a man with a small mustache, Edward, the great uncle I never knew. Sound of a phone from an old movie rings across 60 years. The voice of the Red Cross. The Nazis, they kept precise records. More are found every month. Fading numbers on a scrap of paper. Edward, sent to Auschwitz, April 29th, 1942. Brief song of a single bird. Edward falling into the emptiness of time. Sand in the wind. Edward, more real and more lost than before. Knots in a rope. This ache in my blood. Thank you.
Fantastically gorgeous poems, Lori. Those lines, two kinds of time. I mean, how many of us Jewish people know that we keep that different time, the Sandy Koufax time, and then everybody else's time, and then the railroad ratcheting across my history books, sound of a phone ringing across 60 years, falling into the emptiness of time. That line about Edward, more real and more lost. And then the beautiful ending, this ache in my blood. Thank you so much. And now it is my turn to read some poems, and it feels correct to preface my poems and round our reading by echoing David with another poem by the Hungarian poet Miklós Radnóti, because it's an honor to be a voice for those whose voices were silenced. This is an excerpt from one of the 10 poems that, as David told you, was found in the pocket of his raincoat when his body was exhumed from a mass grave in Hungary. And this little excerpt, à la recherche. Where is that night, that inn, that table under the lindens? And where are the living? Where are the trampled in battle? My heart hears their voices. My hand preserves their pressure. I summon their lines. Their proportions loosen. I seek their measure. I, dumb prisoner, here on the sad heights of Serbia. Where is that night? That night will never return. For what happened takes from death another perspective. There they are, sitting at a table, wreathed in girl smiles, and they'll drink yet from this glass. Those who sleep unburied in forests deep and remote and in foreign fields. And now I'm going to share a little set of my own poems of the Holocaust and family trauma. And this first poem is called Star Children. In Holland, they say, The trains always ran on time. The trains, they say, always ran on time. I could say it slower, though you know I speak quickly. I could say it quietly, but it's screaming in my heart. In Holland, they say, they were good to their Jews. The Juden, they say. They consented, they say, to putting stars on the children. The Star of David, a yellow star, constellations of the innocent ones on trains that always ran on time. They were good to their Jews, they say, allowed a bit of normalcy, and perhaps an older woman would brush the hair of the younger ones or soothe them to sleep or rock the little yellow starred ones that slept to the whistle of the trains that ran on time. She was a star child too. But the star was not yellow, and it was not pinned to a blue wool sweater. The trains here also ran on time. Her mother would take her and her little sister to sit in Penn Station on 34th Street. She would buy them jujubes, and they would rest their legs, rocking their little luggage back and forth. There was nowhere to go, and the conductor would call the times of the trains that ran through to these impossible late-night elsewheres. Have I told you that the ceiling there is made of stars, of all the constellations, and of two small girls at their mother's feet in a train station going absolutely nowhere? Under those stars, the children closed their eyes and went there. The next poem is called Listen Carefully. You won't want to hear it. The sound of glass breaking in 1100 synagogues, you don't want to hear it. Treblinka, Dachau, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, you don't want to hear it, and I don't want to tell it, but I do, over and over, the names and the glass crashing into cobbled streets in a new Germany in 1938. 84 years, I say, don't you say, don't say it. The world knew, I say. Someone must have heard the fires as they roared up the aisles, burning the mechitza, burning the bima, licking the velvet curtain of the Aron Kadesh, and finally the Torah ablaze, crumbling to ash. Our scrolls, so holy, we pray before touching, make laws for the law. Our holiest ablaze in the shattering dark. It was night, and the butcher and baker and candlestick maker became ashes, and we all fell down. You don't want to hear it. I try not to hate. I don't hate, actually. These days, I think of sirens and alarms. I answer all calls, all letters. I'll respond to any summons. Say, yes, I am here, and I know. I remember. I want to remember. I want to remember the past. I want to name all the extinct species. I want to remember the trees I climbed and the way being 14 was so sad and scary in a family where my stepfather touched me and no one rang an alarm, not ever. You don't want to hear. I don't blame you. It's ugly. Glass breaking all around us in an old night, in a dark that is dangerous, a shard of a family, brittle pieces of history, casualties of war. Berliner Zeitung. Across Germany, the train tracks have healed. Across Poland, cicatrix are closing, where the woman cries out, I made it, I lived through it. Auschwitz grows a carpet of Edelweiss, and it's real, that sweet smell, the tiny faces shaking in the wind. In Austria, cafes reopen, newspapers speak the truth every way we fold them. Kaffee mit Schlag, a dash of cinnamon, sharp and sweet. The memory doesn't pierce, it soars. The woman says no, and means it. The museums are open and Freud's house is closed. No one climbs on that tedious hard couch again. They go to see the Klimts. Golden men and women in shimmering embrace. See how he leans over. He takes her up into himself as if she were precious, and she finally is. I'm standing in that gallery now, on the boulevard. The echoes have finally died away. Silence moves in waltz time again, the Strauss of quiet. Everywhere, rallies are over, and Jesse Owens runs the mile in a blaze of possible. That memory is left. When the people cheer, it is for him, and he is winning. And I'd like to read a new poem that I wrote for us for today. And this poem is called It's on Us. It's the old grief again, come today, in this year of Shemitah, of sabbatical, of release, a year to rest ourselves, our lands, our ancient hatreds, a year of olives and honey, of figs and pomegranates, of sweetness. Who by heart and who by soul, who by dream and who by drift, who by avodah, by prayer, by work, who by love and who by sorrow, who by peace and who by disaster, home seekers, God wrestlers, journey makers, who by light and who by forest. Today, all are called to stand at the gates of Auschwitz. Rings and words sewn into our hems, tucked our hearts beneath the suitcase lining. Today, we speak the word back to the giver, shine light back to source of all light. We've been running on fumes, on coffee, on oil, on must have and have to. Today, we quit. Today, we bless and invite the white fire of silence the poem burns into, both whole and here, an aleph bet of accord. Neruda said, keeping quiet, said, if we for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves, of threatening ourselves with death. Love is the user manual on holy days and lonely days. Via ahavta, you shall love. May all our lives be a blessing. May we live each day to its fullest for the sake of all that is life. Oh, new ear that hears, oh, little sister, oh, my brother. Thank you. Woo! It's so much to read poems and so wonderful. So now it is a sweet pleasure to invite all our extraordinary poets of this evening back on stage so you can see us all and begin our Q&A. So here, you can now see us all, and we're all here. And let's see. There is one question. Oh, and this is a question for you, Artful. And actually, this was a question that if you ever go online and you try to Google Holocaust poetry, you are going to come across this this piece of writing, this conversation by the scholar Adorno, where he says, let's see, what does he say exactly? He says, after Auschwitz, it is barbaric to write a poem, or after Auschwitz to write a poem is barbaric. And this is a really important and interesting conversation for all of us. But maybe we'll take a few people chiming in. But Art, what do you think about this? What's your
Well,
thinking?
barbaric, bearded, the barbarians. It's an interesting usage of thought that Western civilization has a bully element, has that kind of bully energy, and so to write about it from a perspective, a European perspective, is almost barbaric in the aftermath of what happened. But there's been so many genocides. I'm really with Donna Haraway. I really think it's important we stay with the troubles. We don't let them fade away, and we don't dwell on them necessarily. We grieve, we remember, and we move on. We move on in our lives, and we move on in the world. So I think it's important um, to hear these works, particularly the ones that come directly from those who experience them. To me, hardly barbaric.
I have to say that as I read and read Holocaust poetry, both by survivors and what's being written now, and listen to what everyone in here is writing, again, I go back to this, to bearing witness that these are ways that we can sing this story back into the world so that we can keep it from happening again. Anybody else want to weigh in on this question? Anybody else? David, what are you thinking?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would suggest that in this case, I think Adorno's quote is complicated, and it's obviously embedded in this longer passage. They had another point to make, but that became the famous sentence. I'd suggest it's no more barbaric after Auschwitz to write poetry than it would be barbaric to pray. A lot of people said, obviously, Auschwitz proved God was in fact dead. And yet, if you look at the Kaddish, I assume most people who know it, who could read it, it might be worth reading. But if people want, we can read that loud. But the Kaddish, it doesn't mention death. It doesn't mention heaven or hell or judgment. The Kaddish is a poem of praise and gratitude for the creation. A poem of, especially really of gratitude. And strange as it may seem, for us to be alive and to be able to express that gratitude for the creation is not ever an obscenity or a barbarism. Although, barbs are good. As oh my God, that's a good one. Beards are good. Although I thought the word came from the way that the Greeks supposedly thought that people whom they couldn't understand spoke. They went bar, 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 bar. So the Greeks made fun of that and called it barbaric. Bar, 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 bar. At any rate, I like the pun on the beard too. In any event, if you can't write poetry after Auschwitz, then you can't even pray after Auschwitz. And it certainly is possible to pray. And in fact, even Jews, obviously, continue to pray after Auschwitz, and they continue to say Kaddish, in which they say God is great. God is thank you for the creation, God. So that contradiction doesn't seem to be a problem. In fact, it seems to me spiritually, as I grow older, more and more profound. And obviously, it's important to try to write good poems after Auschwitz. If you're going to talk about Auschwitz, as these poets all here have, you better be on your A game, because it's not an easy subject to take on. But I don't think there's a problem there, really, as such. Although one can understand, when Adorno was writing at in that time and place, why somebody might say that. It's pretty hard to sit down after watching Night and Fog or reading Elie Wiesel or So This Is a Man to say, now I'm going to write a sonnet. It's certainly a challenge, but I certainly believe it can, and obviously it has been done, as it has tonight.
And I think important to do, and I love that we got to hear Paul Celan's poem so much tonight. I love that.
Really.
Black Milk, that poem, that poem, that poem. All right, there's another question, and it's kind of to all of us, asking when we wrote these poems. So, I don't know, Linda, when did you write your poems?
Well, the first poem, Journey, I wrote, oh, God, decades ago, honestly. And the idea of the strand of pearls in that poem, I had never heard of Abraham Sutzkever. I just had this thing about jewelry, you know, that idea of portable property, if you will, Dickens with Great Expectations. Of course, you carry, when you think you're going somewhere, and many people on their way to concentration camps, they didn't know what was going to happen to them. They took their jewelry, something easily exchanged, something you could put in your pockets. But even more importantly, jewelry usually is given to us by somebody who we loved and who loved us. And when you wear it, you carry it, that person with you. So I got all obsessed with that idea for Journey. And then, of course, the other poem, I did read that section of epitaphs, and I thought, oh God, I just have to try to do something myself. I have to repeat his message, even in a small way. So that's what I did, tried anyway.
Let's see. Natalie, when did you write your poems?
It took me a couple of years to write that poem. I did a lot of research too after I came back from Prague. But I think probably 2008, 2010 in there somewhere. Yeah, the experiences take a long time to germinate for me, so I just kind of hold them there for a while.
Yeah.
Before putting them down.
That felt like a deeply metabolized poem to me, hearing it. Yeah. Bob, when did you write your poems?
Let's see, for Annie Ney, I wrote that at least 20, 25 years ago. And it appears in one of my books called My Shtetl. And the other poem about being in the Hall of the Righteous, I wrote a couple of months ago for a book about the Grateful Dead, actually.
I love Jerry Garcia coming in at the end of that poem. Gail, when did you write your poems?
Oh, the one the one that I wrote most recently was Don't Stare at the Sun, and that one was written in the advent of was the Trump, where suddenly there was a whole movement of people following something that I would never have thought was going to happen. I've always known that we are not that it could happen here, of course, that the United States was not wasn't every country it can happen to, but the swiftness with which it happened scared me. But my family always told me it could happen. Of course it could happen. And I was raised on that it could happen anywhere, and that each of us had to guard against it. It was our duty to guard. I mean, I'm sure all of you probably came from families where voting was an absolute, oh my God, it was, you didn't, you had to go to the dumbest things you had to vote on, you had to show up at the school ones, and yeah.
Gail, I'm really grateful that you wrote that poem.
I'm sorry?
I'm really grateful that you did write that poem and drew that analogy tonight for us.
Because you see where it comes from?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where we were.
Yes, that is exactly.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, when did you write your poems?
I read it many, many years ago, and thanks to the influence of a friend, Simone Zelich, who read this book, Louisa, she also read this book, Moses and Sinai, and she also read this book, Judenstadt.
Thanks. Let's see, Lori, when did
Uh,
you write your poems?
Both of my poems that I read are about 15 years old, and they were published in a chapbook in 2013 called From Stettel to Santa. That was pretty much about my growing up, and followed by an essay about my husband, who was a professional Santa Claus and was the antithesis of everything I'd known growing up. But he was a good human. And when you remember who talked about the saints, the Gentile saints, um, his family was like that. They weren't connected with Europe, but it's good to know those people are still around us. It's important that we recognize the helpers.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you had that in there. And let's finish out the night by hearing from you. Art, when did you write that Holocaust poem?
Well, I take it as a duty when I'm asked to read, especially on the theme, to think about it and reflect on it. And I looked through my work and I didn't really have a poem about the Holocaust. So I wrote that a couple days ago in response, really, to this event.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I thought that that was true. And I'm so glad because it was also really enriched by all the echoes of everything you'd been reading. And
It was, yeah, the selection was really powerful to get um, to read through a few, and then the ones I picked were quite amazing. Someone gave me Solange the book, and I didn't understand it as a younger poet, and it's taken me many years. Now, as an elder, I really understand that oblique way, that slant way that approaching this particular tragedy.
yes, I love that poem. But it takes many readings and worth many readings. So that was a wonderful question, wonderful to hear everyone's voices again. And now it is time to close our evening together. We want to thank you, our audience, so much for spending this night of remembrance, this Yiskor of Yiskors with us. All of us poets wholeheartedly also thank and bless Beth Franklin, the director of the Colorado Poets Center, for creating this opportunity for us to share this night, these memories, and these poems with you. And all of us offer our huge thanks to our technical director, Tina Bika, because of whom this beauty, this lovingly presented community is possible. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Tina. And now, thank you all. Thank you, poets. Good night. Buenas noches. Bon nuit.